going back to pricing now, I think it may be Warren Buffett. I think he's attributed to many different quotes, and he's said so many brilliant things. So probably it was him. He's talking about you either want to be the most expensive or in the most expensive of the services that you offer, goods or services, or it's going to be a race to the bottom and you're commoditized, in which case it's a very, very difficult business. Hello, welcome to the Amazing Marketing Show, where we talk about all things marketing, including what may be the most important thing about marketing is the money, the price, the dollar sign, or wherever you are, euros or whatever else. Pricing is huge, so we're going to jump into it. I'm Dmitri Smirnov here with Chris Gray. Chris, what's going on?
Dmitri, what up, brother?
Pricing is a big deal, right? I mean, consciously or not, unless we're not looking at the price, in which case, congratulations to you. Things are going well. I'm happy for you. But if for most consumers who are looking at the price, especially if it's something you care about, right? Even if it's a low ticket item, we want to know what the price is. That's part of the decision of a price, right? Even if we're buying milk, okay, and it's $3, or the super organic glass bottle is $6 or $7, it certainly plays a role. So how do you feel? We'll put it more on the feeling side, because marketing is emotions as well as the data side. So how do you feel? What are your emotions around price?
I think that my emotions right now are, I'm not sure if this is an emotion as much as it is a thought. The first thing that comes to mind is that this is a timely conversation. We work with a company that they have a specific job, but I think one of their other strengths is data. The data shows right now, here we are, and it's 2024, June 2024, and there's some stuff happening in the economy. And this is not a feeling. You could see it in the Starbucks sale. Starbucks sales overall are down. Restaurant sales overall are down. You're having concerts of people like I think J-Lo and other people who have historically, they're not popular right now, but they've historically had a fan base and they can do this for the rest of their lives. Well, their concerts are getting canceled because people aren't buying tickets. Pricing is an issue right now. People aren't spending money the way they did 2 or 3 years ago, and it's impacting several industries. And it most definitely impacts us. My feelings when it comes to pricing is there's some nerves there, which I can talk about here in a bit. But I think that this is an important conversation and a timely conversation.
I can tell you about how price makes me feel. And I think this is part of a much, much, much deeper conversation of childhood, growing up, immigrant, money, being affording whatever clothes, shoes that you want, and all that stuff. And I've heard this. I've heard other people say this before, but I'm on this group, and I wonder if anyone can relate. And post this in the comments if you do. But for a long time, I valued almost everything in how many Chipotle burritos I could get for that price. So if something cost at the time, this was 15 or 20 years ago at this point, but at the time burritos I think were $6.50. And so if something cost $100, I'm like, well, I could get 15 burritos for that price. Like, is this worth 15 burritos, which is a week's worth of food effectively? And so pricing is, to me, it's something that's important. It's something that is illogical, because depending on how it's presented, someone might be receptive to it or completely against it. And it can be completely illogical. And we know about the different tricks we can play of relative pricing. And we know the classic example of the movie theater drink sizes, and like it's the $4 for the small, and it's $6 for the medium, and $6.50 for the large. And everyone's like, well, I'm going to get the large for $6.50 because it's only 50 cents more than the medium, but the medium price was a decoy to get you to spend $6.50 instead of the $4. So pricing can be played with. Pricing, I think, in many people's minds is very emotional. It can be very painful. And you're right. It's a super timely conversation to have, not just from a consumer side, but from a marketer side. How should you price your items, and how should you make your price palatable, if not attractive? So let's get into that.
So let me ask you this. Let's say that you got a marketing agency, you're growing, you got more work than you can handle, so you have to start hiring people. And you're doing it, let's say you're doing it right now where inflation's, high. Do you then raise your prices to support this staff that you're getting? Or do you keep your prices the same and, take less money up front with the hopes that the staff is going to help your company grow and get more money in the future?
I think it becomes a strategy decision what you decide to do as a company. We know that what economics tells us, and by the way, I was an economics major in college, so I want to say don't do that. Don't get that major. It's kind of worthless. You can learn all this on YouTube easily. Um, Pricing, you can make more money basically by raising your prices or selling more of your stuff at your current price. Okay, so it's pretty simple. So if I were to hire more people, I need to decide, am I hiring them to do a better job for my existing customers, in which case I should raise the price, or or maybe not. You can always make the case of I'm going to do a better job and that's going to differentiate me, and maybe they'll stay for longer. So that's another thing. You can get a higher value over time from a customer. Or is the strategy of the business to then fulfill on more clients the same way that you're already doing? So I think in that case it depends. Uh, and then you mentioned the inflation. There's so many things around inflation. I want to talk about that in this episode, but there's a lot of things to consider as a business owner, and I kind of want to throw it back to you, to the question you asked me is what would you do?
It's I'll give you a story. I'll answer the question in a second. I want to give you a story first about pricing. We were I was on a meeting with a client, and this is one of those kicking the what type meetings because it was just it's a HVAC client, AC repair. It's hot in Texas. This client's in Texas, and they weren't getting any calls. That's a whole other reason why, but it's one of these calls where you prepare for it, knowing that you have to answer some tough questions and you have to explain some stuff, which we did. And for the conversation was going relatively well. And we speaking of hiring, we just hired a client manager, and this client manager is in the meeting, shadowing me, watching me handle these curveballs and kicking the whats, right? And so he's watching, and the conversation's going well. And then this lady interjects, and we're looking at the guy, we're looking at what he's spending on his total marketing and his SEO. He does SEO with us, and I was like, hey, that's high. Let's do this. Let's reallocate these funds. Blah blah blah. And I was saying I wasn't talking about his SEO. I was talking about something else. I was saying, hey, that's high. Let's reallocate these funds and put it to something else. And the lady comes in and she's like, that SEO is high. That's a lot of money. Like, what is he getting? What's why is that so much? And she stumped me, Dmitri, not because she was right. She stumped me because I couldn't immediately come back and and give her a logical answer. Like, you are in this client is in Texas, one of the most, it's like Arizona, one of the most competitive markets for AC repair. And he's trying to rank he's in a big city and he's trying to rank. This is not a $500 SEO budget. This is not a one blog thing. It's a drop in the bucket, right? Um, and I kind of said something like that, but just wasn't articulate. It was more of basically I was basically saying, no, it's not. You're in Texas. That's not a sufficient answer, right? And so I took we started talking about pricing, and then I just came off a meeting where I whiffed on a curveball, and not only did I whiff, the guy that I'm training watches me whiff. I have to own that and
Yeah.
get better at that or whatever. But I think that to answer your question, about pricing, to me, it's contextual, right? Depending on where you're at and what you're doing, what you have going on. And for us, it was we're the question, the thing I just gave you. We're in that stage where we just hired a bunch of people, but we haven't really raised our prices. But our prices are relatively higher than our competitors. For one, we give the value, which I was unable to articulate when it came to SEO with this individual. But one, we give the value overall, and two, we give the results, and three, we compete in harder markets. Your $500 SEO budget for HVAC may be all good for a city or a state that doesn't really have extreme heat. But if you're in Texas or Arizona, your $500 HVAC SEO is going to be a drop in the bucket when you look at the competition that you're dealing with.
I like the point that you mentioned about your new team member who is shouting you, and it sounds like you may have found a good person because she actually questioned, or he or she actually questioned what you did rather than just taking it as
Oh no,
gospel.
sorry,
So,
sorry, sorry. I explained that story wrong. It was the person shadowing me didn't ask the question. It was the client and there's and somebody with them who asked the question.
oh, I
So the
see, I
person
see,
shadowing me just watches me get a whiff
I
or
see.
watches me whiff the question from the client.
Well, that's actually a good thing anyway, because sometimes it's to be expected that there's a whiff, and it's how do you react to it? How do you salvage it if it
Yeah.
needs to be done? So that's probably actually really good for the person shadowing you to see that. Going back to pricing now, I think it may be Warren Buffett. I think he's attributed to many different quotes, and he's said so many brilliant things. So probably it was him. He's talking about you either want to be the most expensive or in the most expensive of the services that you offer, goods or services, or it's going to be a race to the bottom and you're commoditized, in which case it's a very, very difficult business. And when it comes to agencies or something like that, a service business, I think, well, you have to also believe this, but I think that you want to be on the high end of pricing in your industry. Now, you should do some research, obviously. What is everyone else charging? Make a spreadsheet and see what do I need to do from a marketing perspective and from a results perspective for me to be able to charge in the top range, in the top of this range of pricing. And that, to me, is an easier job to do because you're providing a ton of value to a few customers rather than trying to provide a little bit of value to a lot of customers. Any little mistake and that tiny razor thin margin goes away, you're now unprofitable. Whereas on the other side, you have relationships with your clients, you have a little bit of extra wiggle room to work with, and it's a win-win for both sides because you can both be committed to each other. I think we've talked about that on another episode, is client and agency commitment and how much that can improve performance over the long run, and it's such a win-win. So like that's where it makes sense in my opinion to live on pricing.
You said something that I completely agree with, about being more expensive or being on the higher end compared to your market. There was another mastermind that I'm a part of. You go in there and it's a bunch of agency owners. And, my business partner for our agency is brilliant. He's the one who led this. He's the one who led the pricing. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be doing the margins that we're doing. So we go into this other mastermind of other marketers, and they're they're okay as far as financially, they're okay, but a lot of them aren't thriving. And then you start hearing some of their pricing models, and I'm like, I could see it. That type of pricing model, that's whatever it is, attracts a certain type of person looking for a deal. It attracts a certain type of business who can afford the higher pricing model. So your pricing model by itself has kind of filtered out the higher end clients. If you're a higher end client, you got a big business or whatever, and somebody's telling you that, hey, it's only going to be, $500 a month for my marketing, they might look at you like you're a small fish, like this is not valuable. And we do that. I do that. There's certain, when I'm shopping for things and I see that, let's say this fan is much cheaper than this other fan, well then I that tells me this fan down here is not doesn't have the value of this fan up there, right? That's just an example, but I think you get the essence of what I'm saying. And people do that with business. And so if you come out the gate, I'm not saying that everybody can do this, right? If you're just starting a business, you may not be able to come out and charge $1 bajillion for your services because you have no proof. What I am saying though is that your pricing model can be a reflection of the value that you bring.
100%. There's this story I heard, a real true story, and I've heard this multiple times, both in private industry and in government, where a company that was bidding on a job bid the most competitive, the lowest price by far of anybody who bid. And they had great services, and they were not even considered because those companies and that government could not fathom that this service could be delivered in a quality way for that price. They said it was something to the it was something like the bid was $10,000 a month, I believe, was the bid that was put in one of these examples, and the response was, "We're looking for someone more in the 40,000 range." Right? This is a huge project, by the way. Okay, so they didn't even for the same exact price. It is possible that a company would rather pay more, or it's just like, especially if it's a big company and it's corporate or it's government. There's a certain budget that needs to be spent, and the one who's charging, in this case, again, it's a big project, 10,000 a month, was not even considered. It was the 40, $50,000 bids that were looked at, and then made a decision based off of those. So pricing is certainly a driver of value, or perception of value at least. That was an important story for me to hear years ago, and so and researching the market is also important. Is what is everyone else kind of, where do they stand? Because you don't want to, just like you don't want to go way over in pricing, you also don't want to come in way under.
So then if you are, say you're new, if you're new to a market, do you I mean, you might just answer this, but do you do exactly what you said? It was to come in super high and then adjust a little lower, or do you come in somewhere near the top and then go higher?
I kind of have an idea of this, and so now let's walk through it. Let me talk to you. Let me walk through this. I'm not fully certain, but I think maybe if we talk this out, we'll get there. So if you're a new player in a space, first of all, do your research. See what everyone else is doing. Make a spreadsheet of it. Here's the upper range, here's the lower range, here's the mid range. Now, you don't want to be in the mid range. You really either need to, if you're competing on price, fine, compete on price. You got to be at the bottom of the range. That's a difficult game to play, but it's a game that can be played. Or you can compete on value, on quality, and so you're going to be at the top of the range. Now, whether this is physical product or services, what I've heard the experts say, experts who are ahead of where I am, they talk about testing the market first. So you say, let's say you have availability. You just put out that I only have availability for 3 clients right now, and I'm giving you this introductory price. Okay, and this is a step. It's just dipping your toe in the water. Is someone going to take this offer? And same thing with physical products. We only have 100 available. This is a one-time pricing, and I think actually starting a little bit lower makes sense to me, because you want to move up. And as an ads manager, more so than an ads manager, a data manager, an optimization expert, I'm looking to find the top of that curve. Let me give you an analogy. What I'm trying to say is, let's say you have 80 feet of fencing, and you want to fence to the maximum amount of land. Okay, you're trying to figure out, how do I do that? Well, I could put 10 feet on one end and 10 feet on the other end, and then I'll have 30 on the long end and 30 on the long end parallel to that, right? So that becomes a 30 by 10, which is a 300 square foot property. Or you can organize that same 80 feet of fence by putting 20 feet on each side. And now that's 20 by 20, and that's a 400 square foot property. You've just optimized your fencing by doing the right math. Hopefully, that was an understandable example. I try to be simple with that. But the same thing can be done with pricing, where there's a place at a certain price where you're going to get the maximum amount of profit for it. You might not sell the most units, you won't sell the fewest units typically, but this is going to be your sweet spot of where you have the most customers coming in paying you at the right amount of margin, where your total output for the business is the most profitable. So people usually don't like to see when prices come down after they've purchased at the higher price. You're going to get a lot of complaints. That's why I recommend studying your market, coming in towards the top, middle top, and then just keep increasing that price until you've hit the point where the marginal return is no longer worth it.
Then say, Dimitri, I'm coming to you, right? Let's say you're a business owner, you establish what that looks like, and you're near the top of the market. And I come to you and I'm like, hey, Dimitri, I need help with these YouTube ads, whatever it is, and you can do. You give me the price, and I'm like, well, man, Dimitri, that's a little too high. What do you usually say when somebody asks you that?
So it's more of a hypothetical because most people don't say that. If they think it's too high, they'll just not
Yeah,
buy the service. They're like, this wasn't for me. There, no one's negotiating pricing typically. It seems like. A side note, tangent. It seemed like back in the day, everything was negotiable. And I think it still is, but nobody negotiates. It's like, this is the price, either take it or leave it, is how people, even though business owners would be open to negotiating pricing potentially. Uh, especially like even at a department store. I bet I've heard of people negotiating at department stores. I think that's pretty funny. Um, but when if somebody were to say that, that means that I didn't explain to them the value that they were going to get, because pricing actually doesn't really matter, right? Because if you pay somebody $1,000 and you know that they're going to return you $2,000 worth of value, then your question isn't, can I afford the $1,000? It's, how much money can I possibly scrape together to put into this money tree that's going to return double my investment every time. So if somebody were to tell me that we can't do that pricing, that means I failed to deliver the value of my service, how much they're going to get, likely going to get in return over time.
that's a really good point. I was thinking back to the scenario I had earlier where I'm the direct response guy in our business. I'm the direct response guy, and my business my strength is in direct response, and my business partners, he has many strengths. One of them being SEO. And so when the lady asked me about SEO and I couldn't articulate it the way that I wanted to, I think in retrospect, my response to that would have been a question like, compared to what? Because she has this view of her head of people spending $500 for SEO or whatever. And if I'd asked her that question as compared to what, and then continue to ask questions to walk her down the path of, here's an example in this scenario, this company had hired several, she represents a corporation, like a franchise, right? So I'm talking to the franchise owner, and she represents the franchise, right? And so it was these two, the franchise owner, and then the person representing the franchise. The person representing the franchise asked me this question, but I know for a fact the person representing the franchise, they've gone through a few marketing companies who pooped the bed because they weren't doing the stuff. So if I asked compared to what, she would have compared it to one of these franchises that they've essentially fired. And I could have gone down the money train of, well, you've been hiring these cheap SEO practitioners, and the proof has been in the pudding. That's one scenario. But I think what you said is meta, where if they're asking that question, the value hasn't been communicated, and that's the root. If I find myself in that situation again, I think I approach it Socratically and start asking them questions.
Sometimes this is so true, Chris, that sometimes the client will never know the value that you provide until they try other
Yeah,
services, other providers, and only then can they come back and say this was in fact the great service. Or first they are with other services that come to you and it's an improvement. That's a great way of getting a customer for a long time because they know what the alternatives are. That really helps actually in a sale and in retention. It really helps when a client has gone through other variations with less success. It's an amazing selling point.
yeah. Uh, that's yes, like that's happened with us where we've had clients leave us, go somewhere else for because it was less expensive or whatever it was, and then they come back and they see why where they get a better idea of what they were paying for and the value they were getting out of it.
Yeah, and so I want to move a little bit towards businesses, local pricing. And I wanted to share a story that I remember seeing that really put pricing on the map for me more than ever before. And it was at a restaurant. I was eating at a restaurant, and we got the bill at the end of it, and it was, the menu prices, the tax, probably tip was included. You know how restaurants do that nowadays, and they're like, what's your additional tip? But the thing that was really shocking was they had a 3.5% tax that they called minimum wage tax that they just arbitrarily assigned to their menu. So to me, it was a really interesting price game from both a numbers perspective and a psychological perspective. So instead of raising the prices on the menu, which would make a difference, the menu prices remain the same, but the ultimate price was higher. And the excuse was, or the marketing behind it was, that we need to do this to pay our servers who need to make minimum wage, like now a human rights argument or something like that. So it's a sneaky way for the business
Yeah.
owners to get a little bit higher pricing without actually showing it that way, or at least having an opportunity to explain it.
What did you think about that when you saw it? How did it make you feel?
It made me feel very angry. I felt like I was tricked. I felt like arguing it, and then later on, they showed me the menu where at the bottom, very bottom of the menu, in fine print, and said there's 3.5%. So they put it on the menu. It's like the same thing as a advertorial, effectively, but they put it somewhere. So it was on the menu. But it was certainly. Um, I didn't like it, and I never went back to that restaurant.
That was my next question. Did you ever go back to that restaurant? So then that restaurant, but then I wonder, you are analytical, you catch details. I wonder how many people are just, I don't think I would have caught that. I don't recall ever looking at the tax on my restaurant uh, bill. So I wonder if it's like they play that game where, hey, we're probably going to lose out of 10 people, we may lose one or two, but we're going to make money off of eight. So let's just keep playing. Yeah.
It's similar to the trick of now anywhere you buy food from, or almost anything, is the turning around the iPad and saying answer a couple questions, and it's like, do you want to tip 45%? It's like,
Yeah.
excuse
Yeah.
me, I'm just trying to pick up my carryout order. And so there are some restaurants who don't do the iPad flip, and I like going there, and I'm happy to tip them. I'll give them some cash or whatever if the service or product is, or like I'm supporting a local business or something. But when it's I know a lot of people hate the iPad Flip.
Yeah, and the iPad Flip is unique because it gives you like it's like the illusion of options. Or it's like, do you want to tip 30%, 35%, 40? I'm gonna go to custom and give you your 20%. Like they you can play with the options there, and then people are just going to tap it, and then I would assume that the average tip is much higher than it would be if you let people just do it themselves.
For sure, and your average ticket goes up without raising the pricing. So there are some tricky ways of doing this. Now, I want to intro or set up this next part of this conversation with something that I saw on YouTube. This really cool guy, maybe you've seen him, Peter Santiago or something. He travels all over the country, different places. He records things. I was watching him in Louisiana. He was in out in the sticks of Louisiana, and he went into a restaurant. They talked about how inflation and pricing on their side, these types of business, like all businesses, have inputs and outputs. Input cost, how much they're making on the revenue side, and so this restaurant, small family owned business, is saying they're getting squeezed on the supply side on their supplies. They're having to pay more. Inflation is up, but they're not able to raise their own prices high enough to sustain that. So they're kind of in this catch 22 is on one end, they're getting pushed and squeezed. On the other end, they're not getting the demand on their own product that they want. And so they're definitely confused about pricing. And I'm sure they could have some, they should try to test higher pricing and see what happens. But they're thinking, I want to help my community. These people seem to be very genuine. I don't want to overcharge them for this pastry or whatever. So they probably need a little bit help on that side, but they also need the marketing help. But so what I wanted to pose to you is like, what do you do? What do you do when you're in a situation where you're getting squeezed?
The first thought, it may be easier said than done, is how else can I make money without changing my current pricing structure? Um, what service can I offer? What else can I offer that would have the margin that makes sense? And that restaurant example you gave is again timely. Restaurants are going through this. I think there was a whole uproar about an $18 Big Mac price or something. But when you look in the background, I could be wrong, but you this business owner is trying to make money, right? And they rate that Big Mac was $18. Well, people went nuts, and that was the wrong way to go about it. So, what else? What other revenue streams can you create to get money? If they're already in the door, eating your food or buying your product or in the door, what else can you do to make money? And a brilliant example of this is not apples to apples, but it's an example is people pay to go on a cruise, right? You pay for the cruise, and that's just it. The cruise ship maybe breaks even at that point, maybe if that. But when you're there, they monetize you on this excursion and that excursion and alcohol and food and this and that. Like they upsell you because you're on the boat. They're just gonna sell you all this stuff because you're stuck on this boat. So how can you take that model? They're in my door. They've invested in my services. What else can we sell them?
I love this podcast because I get to learn so much. I had not thought of that. I was thinking about this business. Like, what would I do? I'd probably increase pricing. You just such a much better idea. They have a great opportunity because they're already getting people in the door. They just happen to not be profitable yet. But all that means is they're not profitable yet. So what is it that you're going to offer them that they already like this cheap pastry? Can you sell them now that they like that? What's that really more expensive thing, the high ticket offer on the back end that's going to make all your money? They're missing the high ticket offer.
Yeah,
That's what they're missing. Man, I really like that.
yeah, man.
That's a thinking one right there. That's a thinking one. How can I apply that elsewhere?
Yeah, we stole that from somebody. You know how it is. We're getting these marketing masterminds. You hear people talking. It's just, oh yeah, it makes sense. let's just continue. Let's upsell. It's a model that we see throughout the world.
All right. Well, on that note, pricing, super important. I think you got to take this with math and emotion, just like everything marketing. We know it's all math and emotion. So, what is the market going to bear, and how can you deliver that price in a way that's going to be palatable, even in many cases welcomed? Like, oh man, this is way more than ever. Here's the dream: is so your customer thinks this is way more expensive than all your competitors, but I only want to come here because it's the best.
Yep.
All right, Chris, always a pleasure.
Appreciate you, Dmitri. Peace.
Bye bye.